Okay, so here we are again, just continuing our discussion about what is stress. Um, all right, so the stress response. And I don't think this is probably at least, really new to anybody, the idea of fight or flight. It is actually fight, flight, freeze, or faint. And those are all taken from looking at how animals and so forth in nature respond to threats. Usually always trying to fly first if possible, fight if need be. Some freeze, like deer in the headlights. Some faint, play dead, like opossums. So it's kind of what the system is, different ways that the system is set up to manage threats. All right, so consider for a moment what happens to your body when you get stressed. So think about that for a minute. You got an exam coming up, or you've got a big work thing, or you've got a conversation you'd rather not have, or something is happening to stress you out. What is it that happens to your body? Um, you think about that for a second. I have students who will talk about getting headaches, or others who will talk about butterflies in their stomach, or others who will talk about being really tense. Um, Not being able to eat, some eat more. There's all different ways that the body responds physiologically when we feel stress. So, let's talk about what that really is, though. Walter Cannon was a physiologist, professor, and chairman of the Department of Physiology at Harvard Medical School. And he first defined this whole idea of fight or flight. First defined it in 1915, and he published something called The Wisdom of the Body in 1932 and outlined his theory. He also was the person who introduced the idea of homeostasis, and he coined that term fight or flight. And also first to look at the role of the autonomic nervous system, which is something we'll get into much more deeply, in hormones in the stress reaction. So we go back to Walter Cannon, when we think about what is fight or flight, and looking at what happens inside the body when it gets geared up like this. So here are the things, the stages that we see. A stimulus is sent to the brain via sensory systems. We see, feel, touch, taste, hear something that is threatening to the system. That stimulus that hits the brain then deciphers it as a threat, and we'll talk more about that. But there's parts of the brain that simply ask the question, is this safe or not? Is this okay or not? And if the answer is no, then the nervous system is immediately, an alarm is sent out. All hands on deck. The nervous system is activated and goes into its survival mode. Now, here's the thing. The body will stay activated until the threat is over. Now, I really want you to think about that. The body stays activated until the threat is over. For acute stress and things that happen, the body is meant to go back to homeostasis, like stage 4. Body returns to homeostasis, meaning it's all homeostasis, being balanced. It's looking for balance, for calmness once that threat is gone. So the body systems will do many things to go back to return to homeostasis. That in their nervous system, that would be our relaxation response will kick in to bring the sort of fight or flight system back down, so we can get kind of back to base. But body stays activated until the threat is over. That's really important to remember when we think about chronic stress. And if the threat is never felt to be truly over. And when I say that, I think about a lot of our kind of days these days. Oh my God, I got up late. I've got to get to work, or I've got to get to class, or I got to get so much done. I got to get the kids to school, whatever it is. And then I'm running late, and then there's so much traffic, and somebody cuts me off, and I catch every light, and all of these things happen. And then I get to class, or I get to work, or I get to wherever, and I'm worried about what's going to happen, or I have a test, or I have something that's due at work, or blah, 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 blah. It just goes on and on and on. So when does the system get the chance to go back to that homeostasis? That's when something can become chronic. But this is the way it's set up to kind of work. Gets the stimulus, goes under threat, activates the system, and then it goes back when the threat is over. Homeostasis. So hormones are released. The brain has the neurotransmitters it sends out, but then also the endocrine system sends out hormones, especially adrenaline, norepinephrine, and cortisol. Survival mode is triggered. All of these things at work to actively make certain things happen in the body. Heart rate increases, blood pressure increases. Now, think about it. Fight or flight is a very, very old system set up with early human when we were living on the plains having to, fight for our food, and probably a lot more fighting and fleeing on like a physical survival. Now, I do not mean to say that there are not physical survivals necessary in our world, but this is a very old ancient system. And um, so what it does, no matter what the stress is, what it does is it directs blood to the large muscles for quick action. So that's hands, arms, legs. It directs blood away from the mid body or digestion. And honestly, that's where all that stomach stuff comes in. It's actually the feeling of this happening. Um, all of that blood and system and energies moving away from digestion, away from the skin surface, and from some systems of the brain, because we have to be able to react really quickly. So the systems of the brain that are we need for reaction are put on alert. The part that is going to like think about it, not so much. Okay, so pupils dilate so that we can see more if it's dark, or we're able to see more. Sweat increases because all of these systems are acting up, and we need to be able to get that energy out. So one of the things I think is really interesting is that blood moves away from the skin surface, and think about what that means, so that if we're cut or something happens, that we don't bleed out. The body is really brilliant when it comes to this, trying to protect us. Other things that happened, increased serum glucose. So the body wants to metabolize energy. This is really important. So it does all the things it has to do to metabolize energy so that we can flee or fight, right? So increased serum glucose, increased fatty acids, all the things that the body uses for energy, it has to bring on board, basically. Increased blood clotting ability. That makes sense because if we do get cut, if something happens, remember, ancient system, then we want to be able to clot and be okay. Decreased gastric activity, that's the stomach thing again. Increased perspiration to cool the body as it's fighting and fleeing. Now, I'm sorry, some of those are repetitive. Keep in mind that in order for this is just kind of important, and I'm kind of maybe going off on a little bit of something that will come up later. But think about that. So much energy is being brought up so that it can be metabolized, so that you can fight or flee. What if your stressor, I'm going to come up here for a second. What if your stressor is not physical? What if it's mental, emotional, cognitive, spiritual, something else? The body has still done all that it needs to do to give you physical energy to fight or fly. But that energy is not being used necessarily, and so that can explain some of the feelings that we have. It can also explain why chronic stress might cause like weight gain, or cause even a lot of those things like high blood pressure. If the energy is not able to be utilized, something has to happen to it, and we feel impacted by it. That's why if we feel stressed out, it's like we want to punch something, or we want to run, or we want to get that energy out sometimes. And that's actually something that the body needs, or will benefit from just physiologically based on what it's doing to prepare us. So I hope that makes sense. What does it do well? It does the stress response. It does really well what it evolved to do. Acute stress, manage things that come and go, that can bring us back. See the little guy running from the saber-toothed tiger. When does it not serve us well? When it becomes like a switch that never gets turned off. And I think that's really important. So again, I know that's a really short one. I'm just going to give you these short ones. Hopefully that'll be okay. And we're going to pick up here in the third video.